11 by Sandra Cisneros. Copyright Luke Sullivan, 2020. Today we're going to begin work looking closely at a short story by Sandra Cisneros called 11. We'll look at the plot and get the gist of the story. What's the author saying? We'll also determine how the author writes her story. This is often referred to as author's craft. Then we'll draw conclusions based on some of the interrelationships we see. Why did the author write this way? We'll finish by writing out some of our ideas in an essay. This is sometimes referred to as text-dependent analysis. So you'll need a journal like we use in school to write down your ideas. If you don't have a journal, staple some lined sheets of paper together. The text 11 by Sandra Cisneros can be found and printed at commonlit.org. Today's prompt. Authors often use figurative language to describe a character. Write an essay analyzing how the figurative language evokes the character Rachel in Sandra Cisneros' 11. Use evidence from the text to support your answer. One element is the figurative language. The other element is Rachel's character. The prompt asks for a detailed examination of these two elements to uncover interrelationships. The reader will infer qualities about the character from the figurative language used. Then the student must use those ideas to draw a conclusion about the text. Usually the conclusion is related to the message or theme of the story. It looks like this symbolically. It's important to emphasize that this is not a pleasure read. This is an academic assignment. So you read the text differently than you would in Anne of Green Gables or The Dark is Rising. The reading technique we'll use is sometimes called close reading. This technique stresses determining a purpose before reading. What will you pay attention to as you read? Close reading also stresses stopping during the read and writing notes and descriptors in the margin or in a journal. The purpose of the first read is to figure out, what does the text say? What's the gist? This is sometimes referred to as a surface read. Stop along the way and write a word or phrase to summarize what is happening in the story. Write this in the right margin of the text. It could look like this. Pause the video and read the text, stopping along the way to summarize what's happening. Continuing with our first read, gather all of the phrases as sentences in your journal. This becomes a summary of the story. Here are questions that demonstrate an understanding of what the story says. Pause the video and answer these questions in your journal. The purpose for the second read is to figure out how the author wrote her text. What are the craft or writing techniques used? As you read, identify the elements of a story and write them in the left margin of the text. Stories have settings, characters, problems, conflict, resolutions, point of view. Pay particular attention to the figurative language. Think about metaphor, hyperbole, personification, simile. What inferences about Rachel can you make from the figurative language you identify? So pause the video, read the passage a second time, taking notes on how the author wrote her story in the left margin of the text. Continuing with the second read, here are some questions that demonstrate an understanding of how the author wrote her story. Write your answers in your journal. The purpose for this third read is to decide which text you'll use to support the points you want to make in your essay. You'll be completing a graphic organizer to gather this information. Looking at the flowchart from our first day, we want to answer the prompt with ideas that address the interrelationships between figurative language and Rachel's character. What figurative language lets you make inferences about Rachel's character? What are those inferences? What is the author's message? Why do the author's choices help her present her message? These are the points you want to make in your essay. Hunt through the text, finding examples that support the points you want to make. Write the author's words in the first column. In the second column, write how the author presented this information and the inferences you've made. The last column is where you'll explain why the author chose this information to develop Rachel's character. It could look like this. Pause the video and complete your graphic organizer. Now you're going to use the information from your graphic organizer to write an essay sharing the ideas that you've gathered. The essay has an agreed-upon structure. The first sentence of your essay uses words from the prompt and serves as a simple assertion. An older writer can add one of the conclusions they'll describe later in the essay. Pause the video and write the opening paragraph of your essay. Each row of your graphic organizer will now be written as a big idea paragraph. One way is to begin with the author's words and then explain the inference you made. The last sentences are used to explain how this evokes Rachel's character. Pause the video and write the information from your graphic organizer as 3 big idea paragraphs. The last section of the essay is the conclusion. A younger writer will repeat the information from the opening paragraph. An older writer will also echo the opening, but she will introduce a something to think about. This can take the form of a what if this element were changed, or by introducing an idea related to one of the text elements. Pause the video and write your conclusions. The last step is to reread the essay. Do your big idea paragraphs address the interrelationships between the figurative language and Rachel's character? Do you explain how this affects the author's message? Do you use appropriate writing and grammar conventions? Make the necessary changes. Good job!